flying today, named Freedom, will be making its second trip to space. It previously supported the NASA Crew 4 mission in April 2022, so just over a year ago. Now, as for our launch vehicle, the Falcon 9 rocket has completed 224 total launches, and 70% of those have been on reflown rockets. The booster supporting today's mission will be lifting off for the first time, as you might be able to tell by the fact that that first stage is shiny and white. The way that I often, tell people is if the paint matches the second stage, it's a new rocket. Well, speaking of firsts, today marks the first time that we're landing Falcon 9 back on land for a crew mission. Previous crew missions landed on a drone ship out in the Atlantic Ocean. So we actually see a live view now of LZ-1. That is the intended landing destination for the booster today. Landing back on land has a lot of benefits. It eliminates the need for our recovery team to be stationed out at sea for days and improves our turnaround time to get Falcon 9 ready to fly again. So I also personally love the land landings because the Space Coast can actually see and hear the booster return to LZ-1. So super exciting.
It's just under 2 hours, 36 minutes to the launch of Axiom-2. As you've seen, the 4-person crew is in the Dragon spacecraft. We're preparing for the first of a series of communication checks. These checks will be with the SpaceX core, and they verify the crew connections in Dragon through an umbilical that remains hooked up to the capsule until liftoff. As I said, the comm checks are going to be with core. That's a member of the Dragon Ops team, and that operations team is located here in the Mission Control Center at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. The Falcon 9 and Dragon launch teams are located in Firing Room 4 at Kennedy Space Center. Now, next activities for the crew, once we get through that initial set of comm checks, we're going to be watching the seat rotation into the launch position. We've also got a suit leak check for several minutes, make sure everything is buttoned up and tight. And then we also have additional communications checks. These will be through RF antennas and NASA's Tracking and Data Relay System, or you may hear it referred to as TDRS for short, and those will be comm checks with the Dragon team. Now, currently, the flight hardware Falcon 9 and Dragon launch teams continue to monitor the vehicles. We're not working any significant issues at this time. We are continuing to just watch the weather. It's Florida, it's late afternoon. Ground level continues to look good, winds are low, and we've got nice looking skies there on the camera view on the left. We are watching upper altitude winds in case some of the anvil clouds do drift over the launch site or the ascent trajectory in the last hour. Now, for upper altitude winds, SpaceX uses a Doppler radar to study wind direction and speed. And that allows the SpaceX structures and control engineers to calculate loads on the vehicle and verify that we're good to fly. The Space Force Range releases balloons for us, and that gets low altitude wind data. That supports Dragon's contingency launch commit criteria. But right now, T-minus 2 hours and 34 minutes. Everything continues to look good. Next up, we're waiting for comm checks. We see the crew right there. Make sure that their connections through the seats, through the umbilical are good. We'll talk to the core, and then we'll take it from there with the remaining series of checkouts of comms, seat rotation, and the suit leak checks. A minute ago, we saw that live view of landing zone 1. There's the crew. Waves all around. The SpaceX support team is backing out of the capsule right now as we get ready for comm checks. Bigger thing is we'll then go into seat rotation, so we want to make sure everybody's out of the way, clear the seats, make sure everything underneath the seats are all stowed for flight and ready to go. We talked about landing zone 1, showed you a live view a few minutes ago. We're hoping to get a nice view of the first stage when it comes back to Earth. About 8.5 minutes after launch, we ought to see that coming back down into that landing zone 1 view. Right now, just waiting for the word from the crew that they're ready to begin the communications checks. coming up on 2 hours, 32 minutes till launch. On the Falcon 9 side currently, the chief engineer is mostly just going around the room, checking with the SpaceX Falcon engineers. They're continuing to top off gas pressure in the helium supply that's used to repressurize first and second stages as we head to space. The attitude control system, gas supplies, the landing leg supplies. We're at pressure. We just top it off a little bit as we continue through the countdown. Other than that, nothing significant on the Falcon 9 right now. Everybody's mostly just looking over the data, watching their systems. Our next major activity on Falcon 9 will actually occur at about T-minus 1 hour and 10 minutes. That's when we're going to begin to bleed in the fuel into the Merlin engine chambers, actually into the jacket where it's used to cool the nozzles as we head out into space. So that'll be our next major activity. We have also done flight termination system checkouts a couple hours ago. Everything looks good there. And the view you can see right now at 39A, Falcon 9, fairly quiet at the moment. Dragon also having the more activity as the crew has ingressed. And right now we're getting ready to begin checks between Dragon and the ground.
We're now T-minus 2 hours, 30 minutes, and 42 seconds until liftoff of Axiom-2. Heading to the International Space Station, we have a T0 time of 5:37 p.m. Eastern Time, 2:37 p.m. Pacific Time. As John mentioned, and as you can see on screen, weather's cooperating at the moment. We can see the exterior of the capsule there. This is actually a great shot because not only can you see the service section, which is where the crew is, you can also see another great view of the trunk. This is where we are able to put unpressurized cargo, and that trunk is the part that will be jettisoned before the crew actually return to Earth. Great view coming to us from our helicopter circling the pad. You can also see below the trunk the white second stage, below that the black inner stage where we have the grid fins attached, and then below that the white first stage. We are standing by for communications checks with the crew. So it will be a series of checks to ensure that all seats are able to communicate with the teams, both at the Launch Control Center in Florida, as well as here in Mission Control in Hawthorne, California. After we get through comm checks, we will perform leak checks on the suits. That's important, just to ensure that all of those zippers on the suits and the fasteners are all in the in their final position, they're closed, and we pressurize the suit in order to basically test that it can hold that pressure over a period of time. In the event of an egress scenario, or excuse me, not egress, of a launch escape scenario after liftoff, the spacesuit actually functions as a mini spaceship within the spaceship. It's able to hold that pressure while the crew return to Earth. Once those suit leak checks are complete, the closeout team will then close the side hatch. As I mentioned before, the side hatch is the door that they use to go in and out of the capsule while they are on Earth. The hatch that they use while they are on station is actually the forward hatch, which is located under the nose cone, which you can distinguish there at the very top of the Dragon capsule, the pointy part that has that diagonal line that indicates where the nose cone is, and that will rotate back. It'll open up and expose the forward hatch, and that's what the Dragon capsule uses to autonomously dock with the International Space Station. So once that side hatch is closed by the closeout team here on the ground,
SpaceX Dragon, comm check, complete 2.
Loud and clear, Peggy, from SpaceX. Helmy.
We have you loud and clear.
It sounds like these comm checks.
All right, good afternoon. Please let us know when you get to step 1.3 and are ready for umbilical comm checks.
Wilco. And SpaceX Dragon, we're at step 1.3, ready for a comm check.
SpaceX copies. Stand by for umbilical comm checks.
Wilco.
Great view of the Axiom-2 crew there as we are standing by for those comm checks.
Commander, pilot, MS1, MS2, comm check.
Commander has you loud and clear.
Pilot, loud and clear. MS1, loud and clear.
MS2, loud and clear.
And core, loud and clear. Umbilical comm check complete. Please report when ready for seat rotation.
All right, all good news there. All those comm checks checked out, and we are now.
SpaceX Dragon, we are ready for seat rotation.
SpaceX copies. Will report when initiating.
As the name indicates, these seats are going to rotate back into the launch position. This will enable the crew to have easier access to those crew displays located above their heads.
Dragon SpaceX initiating seat rotation.
Dragon copies.
We can see those seats now rotating back into the launch position.
On the left.
This moment must feel like that moment on a roller coaster when you're in position to go.
We are at T-minus
Dragon
2 hours.
SpaceX, seats are in the launch position.
Dragon copies.
Okay, a comm there confirming that the seat rotation has been completed. We are at T-minus 2 hours and 22 minutes and 6 seconds from liftoff of the Ax-2 mission from Kennedy Space Center in Florida, carrying 4 Axiom astronauts, Peggy Whitson, John Schaffner, Ali Al-Karni, and Rihanna Barnawi, aboard the Crew Dragon spacecraft. It's been a very exciting day so far. The crew shifted their sleep cycle to match that of the International Space Station and are currently inside Dragon going through their pre-launch checklists.
As of now, the astronauts have already completed their comms checks. That helps to make sure that they can communicate with the teams on the ground. Their seats have rotated from upright to their reclined launch position, which allows them to see and access the display panels there above their head. Up next will be the leak checks to make sure their spacesuits are in proper working condition before liftoff and to do final inspection of the spacecraft. So at this point in time, we're going to stand by, await for those suit checks. We expect them to happen here in the next couple of minutes. After those are complete, the closeout team will be closing the side hatch for flight. That's one of the key...
Dragon SpaceX, you are go for Section 2 suit leak check preparation.
Copy, go Section 2, suit leak check preparation.
Once the suit leak checks are complete and the closeout team closes the side hatch for flight, things will start moving a lot quicker. The opportunity for going back and rechecking, everything is still, we're able to do that before the side hatch closes. So that's why we wait to get through the comm checks, the suit leak checks, the seat rotation. We wait to close the side hatch until all of those are complete so that in the event that, for example, if a zipper isn't quite in place, one of the closeout team members can re-enter the capsule, help the crew member get that into place and re-perform the suit leak check or, whatever it might be. Now, after we get that side hatch closed, the closeout team will depart the pad, and then around T-minus 1 hour and 30 minutes, we'll do launch escape system checks. And then we fast forward to T-minus 42 minutes, and things really start happening in rapid succession.
SpaceX Dragon, care is complete. We're ready for leak check.
Dragon copies and concurs. You are go for Section 3 suit leak check.
Copy, go for Section 3 suit leak check.
All right, so that communication back and forth there between Commander Peggy Whitson and SpaceX Core, or Crew Operations and Resource Engineer, on that console today is Arthur Berrialt. That is the primary voice that we will be hearing communicating to the crew members. That back and forth just confirming that the crew is ready to go to march into that next step, which, as they said, would be the suit leak checks. Essentially, we inflate the suits to a certain pressure for a couple of minutes, and we monitor that pressure level during that time to basically ensure and check that we're not losing any pressure. If we see a pressure loss, that's an indication that something isn't quite fitting right. Maybe there's a little bit of FOD in the visor, so it's not closing completely, or the zipper might not be zipped up completely. So one of the closeout team members will go in and help resolve whatever is causing that. And then they, in that case, would re-perform the suit leak check. But when we did a dress rehearsal on Friday, we got to this step and they breezed right through it.
Yeah.
So. You can actually kind of see the crew there just resting pretty comfortably while these leak checks are underway. So suit leak checks are now underway. We're just holding that pressure and monitoring that pressure level in all 4 suits to ensure that there's no leakage. For those of you that have just recently joined us, we have mission specialist Rayana Barnawi on the left, the far left seat. That is seat number 4. And seat number 3 is pilot John Schaffner. Next to him, Commander Peggy Whitson. And then on the far right, in seat number 1, Ali Al-Karni. We can see the SpaceX closeout team there preparing for the side hatch closure, but like I said, we won't complete that until we have confirmation of 4 good suit leak checks. Now, the area that we see here, the white room, is environmentally controlled. That helps to ensure that Florida insects, humidity, none of that gets into the capsule. That we're able to maintain a clean environment.
You could see them inspecting with the light. You really want to go over that with a fine-tooth comb.
Dragon, we see 4 good suits.
SpaceX copies and concurs. 4 good suits. At this time, closeout team will perform final steps in preparation for side hatch closure. Proceed to section 4, side hatch close, and report when ready to close hatch.
Wilco for Dragon.
All right, good news there. We have 4 good suit leak checks. Closeout team now preparing to close the side hatch. Duke, as you mentioned, yeah, they are really inspecting that side hatch to ensure that we get a good seal there. Very similar to the suit leak checks that we just performed, we will do a leak check on that side hatch where we inflate the seal around the hatch, again, to a certain pressure for a certain amount of time. We monitor that pressure for any decay or pressure loss. And
SpaceX Dragon, we are ready for the closeout team to close the hatch.
SpaceX copies.
I think that's a very polite way of saying it's time for them to go so we can go to space. As I mentioned before, the primary voice that we hear communicating with the crew is the SpaceX Core, which stands for Crew Operations Resource Engineer. That person on console, while it's not the same individual through all phases of flight, but that seat is there and is filled by different individuals throughout the mission, and that is the primary communication to the crew. That person is responsible for updating them on statuses and confirming with the crew that they are ready to proceed to the next step, as we've been hearing them that back and forth this morning. Or I should say this afternoon now at this point. Once we get the side hatch closed, we can see that there's still a closeout team member there under their feet, kind of in that cargo location. It's kind of hard to visualize, but if you want to compare it between the view on the left and the view on that right, on the right-hand side, that closeout team member.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check over ground stations.
Dragon has you loud and clear over ground station.
Core loud and clear. Ground station comm check complete. Stand by for TDRS comm check.
We should be just a few minutes from side hatch closing, but until then, we still have a good view of the crew in the capsule with one of the closeout crew members in the lower part of the screen there. You see them working on their tablets that the crew has. They each have one. Nice view of the Dragon capsule on your left and some great weather out there.
We can see that final closeout crew member making the last preparations and now popping out. So they have now egressed and are back in that white room. As I was saying before, it's kind of hard to visualize if you've never been inside the Dragon capsule, you know, kind of the orientation of where the viewpoint is to the right. Imagine that the crew tablet that we see Peggy and John referencing and working off of is kind of around where those two dots are on the left-hand side of your screen, those two dots on the exterior of the Dragon capsule. You can kind of imagine if you were to draw a line between those two dots, that's roughly where the crew display panels are. And then the crew are essentially laying on their backs, or kind of on their backs, not completely, but they're laying on their backs underneath that. So when we saw that closeout team member there under their feet, if you imagine somebody kind of working in the area.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check, over Tidris.
Dragon has you loud and clear. Over Tidris.
Core, loud and clear. Tidris comm check complete. Stand by for comm checks with DC, MD, and LD in the launch configuration.
Standing by.
Dragon, this is DC on countdown 1. Comm check.
DC, we have you loud and clear.
DC, loud and clear. Stand by for comm checks with MD.
Dragon, MD on countdown 1. Comm check.
MD, we have you loud and clear on countdown 1.
MD, loud and clear. Stand by for comm check over Dragon to ground. Dragon, MD on Dragon to ground. Comm check.
MD on Dragon to ground, we have you loud and clear.
MD, loud and clear. Stand by for comm checks with LD.
Dragon, LD on countdown 1. Comm check.
We have you loud and clear on countdown 1, LD.
LD is you loud and clear as well. Stand by for my comm check over Dragon to ground. Dragon, LD, Dragon to ground 1. Comm check.
We have you loud and clear, LD.
LD also has you loud and clear.
Dragon, SpaceX, launch configuration and comm checks complete.
Dragon copies.
right, so we're finishing up with those comm checks. And I want to point out for those that might be tuning in for the first time or might not be familiar with the structure of those comm checks, that they are actually important. They do mean something. So when we hear, for example, we heard Dragon MD on countdown 1. That is a structure basically saying, hey, who they are calling. So the mission director or MD was hailing the Dragon capsule. So they say Dragon MD, then to identify who is hailing them, and then on the countdown net in which they are, and then the communication net, the loop that they are speaking from. And that's important whenever you have multiple loops and you want to know who's talking where. So in that instance, we heard, the mission director, who for today is Ken Gamerick, SpaceX mission director, basically, continuing with those communication checks. And once we have all of those wrapped up, we will be able to continue on, and that the next step would basically be to perform, close the side hatch and perform that leak check that we were talking about a little bit ago. Yeah, we can see those closeout team members there as they are standing by for the go to close the side hatch. As we saw earlier, they were inspecting the side hatch very carefully for any foreign object debris, which in the aerospace world is known as FOD, F-O-D. And we can see them there just doing their final team checks. You can see the crew there on the right-hand side of your screen following along with the procedures. They do not have games on their tablets, so that's a question I sometimes get. The tablets, as well as the crew display above John and Peggy's head, allows the crew to stay informed on what is currently happening as well as what will be upcoming. So as we said before, we should be wrapping up those communication checks, and then we will get the go to proceed with side hatch closure. And the other thing that we heard during those comm checks was somebody saying loud and clear. That is also an important structure to responding. You could have communication that is loud but garbled. Alternatively, you could have communication that is soft but clear or crisp in the ear, and we want everybody to be able to hear it. So that's why you hear them say loud and clear, because that's basically confirming the volume as well as the crispness of the audio that is being received. Now, in the event that something was not loud and clear, we would be able to tweak it, perhaps the volume levels on the ground side and how they're being fed into the astronauts' ears, as they do have basically custom fit earbuds in their ears for those communication purposes. Some claps and waves. I have a feeling the closeout team is saying goodbye to the crew.
Yep.
Dragon SpaceX. Closeout team is taking final steps in preparation for side hatch closure. Stand by for transition to pad hatch closed. Ensure all items are secure from now through launch.
Copy. Closeout teams performing the final actions. We have secured all items prior to launch, and we're ready for the flight computer transition.
So great news there, as we suspected, the closeout team saying farewell and fair wishes to the Axiom-2 crew. They're now getting ready to close the side hatch. Once again, this room is environmentally controlled, so it helps keep out humidity, insects, which would be considered FOD, and ultimately just help keep that environment clean. We're now progressing with the side hatch closure. They're going to torque it shut. They will now attach equipment that will allow them to inflate the seal to pressurize, pressurize the seal around the side hatch. And as we mentioned before, very similar to the suit leak checks that are performed, that the seal will be inflated to a pressure that will be monitored over a few minutes, and basically monitoring to ensure that there is no loss of pressure, or also known as pressure decay. And if we did see a loss in pressure during this leak check, it would be an indication that
Dragon SpaceX Closeout team has secured the side hatch and has started the side hatch leak check per 4.3.
Dragon copies. We'll follow along.
So if we were to see a pressure loss during this leak check, it would be an indication that something with the seal isn't sitting quite right, in which case the closeout team would be able to reopen the hatch, wipe it down, inspect it. Of course, whenever we are helping the crew, or rather the reason that we help the reason we help the crew get into or ingress the capsule is not only to help make sure that they don't injure themselves or they don't injure their suit, it's also to ensure that they don't accidentally bump that side hatch during that ingress process. We want to make sure that that everything is able to really keep that seal. For that reason, we actually put protective fixturing that is removed right before the side hatch closure. We put that protective fixture there to help ensure that that side hatch is covered during ingress. So the leak check is now underway. As I said before, we're going to hold this pressure for a couple of minutes and just monitor it for any pressure loss. For those of you that have just recently joined, we are now just under 2 hours until liftoff of Axiom-2. It will be heading to the International Space Station. We have a targeted T0 time of 5:37 p.m. Eastern Time, 2:37 p.m. Pacific. Weather continues to look really, really great. Almost picture perfect, I would say. Over the last 24 hours, we did see an improvement in our weather conditions, so something called the POV, or percentage of violation, which is basically our chances of violating one of the weather rules that exist and we have to follow for that liftoff time, and that percentage decreased to only 25%. So everything's still continuing to look good in terms of an on time, that liftoff targeting 5:37 p.m. Eastern. So we are now undergoing the leak check of the side hatch. This side hatch will remain closed until the crew splashes down in 10 days from now, weather dependent. We can see there inside the white room as the closeout team is performing that leak check. This is such a great view because we saw the astronauts add their signatures to the wall there earlier right before they got into the Crew Dragon. This was a tradition that SpaceX started with the Demo 2 mission. NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley were the first to add their signatures to the white room wall. And of course, the Axiom-2 crew got to add their signatures along with the Axiom-1 signatures and Inspiration 4 there along the X that we see on the right-hand side.
Great to think about the representation in all of those signatures too. You have, of course, all of those NASA astronauts in various countries that are involved in that space program, and now with that SpaceX logo and the private astronauts that are going up, and now the sovereign nation companies, or sovereign nations that will be joining for private launches like today with Axiom. It's really cool to see that diversity and that breadth of representation.
Absolutely. As I mentioned before, we are operating to a countdown today. That countdown helps ensure that all the teams are tracking to the same milestones for that T0 time. We are running with plenty of margin at this point in time. We are now awaiting the results of the side hatch leak check. Of course, we build margin into the timeline to allow us to reperform steps that might need to be done. So at this point in time, we've just been flying through all the milestones. So we are tracking with great margin at this point.
Okay, well, while we wait for results on that, we're going to go ahead and look at the crew a little bit more deeply. All right, the Ax-2 mission commander is Axiom Space Director of Human Spaceflight and retired NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson. During the next 10 days, she'll extend her record as the American with the most amount of time spent in space. Here is a closer look at Peggy.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Rocket Tranquility.
I saw the first guys walk on the moon, Neil and Buzz, in 1969. I was 9 years old, and I thought, what a cool job. Of course, I was a farm kid from Iowa. How was I ever going to do that? I didn't tell anybody from the time I was 9, raising chickens and learning to fly and all that. I wasn't telling people that I wanted to become an astronaut because it sounded like an impossible dream. And it wasn't until the first females were selected and I graduated from high school, and that to me was when I decided, hey, maybe this is real. Maybe I really can be an astronaut. And it became a goal instead of just a dream.
Peggy Whitson became the first female commander of the International Space Station. She also set records in these categories: most days in space for a U.S. astronaut, and more hours spacewalking than any other woman.
She understands what human spaceflight really means when you approach it with that awe and respect and humility. It's like you're doing it justice.
The experience of just being in space is incredibly special and unique. But to me, the most important perspective is perspective. You look out the window, you see planet Earth, and it gives you this perspective of how important that we're all one. And we're building this place out in space to replicate the piece parts that we have on Earth. I'm really excited to take this crew up to the space station, number one, because they're all rookies, and this is going to be fun to just relive those first moments with them as they get into space and get to see their excitement and their expressions and joy.
Ax-2 means there's a 2.0 to her career, and now she gets to help a wonderful company to take that next step in its mission.
Her congeniality and her manner, extremely comforting, and it gave me the confidence that I could do this.
She is inspiring. Personally, I look up to her and I want to be like her.
I don't know. I love everything about Peggy. She's my role model.
I'm Axiom astronaut Peggy Whitson.
The pilot for Ax-2 is private astronaut John Schaffner. A STEAM advocate, business pioneer, and lifelong space enthusiast, he's been a pilot since the age of 17 and participates in extreme sports from hang gliding to base jumping to high-performance racing. Let's get to know a little bit more about John.
Why do you do these things?
Well, they're fun. They help you find your edge. I would say limit, but we don't really want to find the limit. You want to find the edge, I think.
John is a human dynamo, and he is multifaceted, and they can go off in any different direction. But that's just the way he is. It's over and above.
I was probably the outlier in the group. I was always striking out and the one climbing trees and on roofs and setting things on fire. I grew up near an airport. I had access to airplanes. I started flying when I was 15. Got my license shortly when I was eligible. It was just something I did. In the early 60s, actually 1963, when Jim and I began flying, it was big news. It's easy for an 8-year-old at that time to fall in love with space. That was our fun. Cardboard boxes, rolling down hills, emulating space training, Jim and I pilots. So space just became part of the fabric of me, and it never left.
I'd heard about private astronaut travel before. A little bit of research pulled up Axiom Space and their mission.
Well, my wife brought it to my attention. She saw the news article of Axiom flying and said, hey, you can finally go to space. And the moment I heard about this opportunity, I knew I would be on board.
He's on a mission to encourage young minds to use their imagination. And from there, he says, possibilities are endless.
I'm taking a patch for the Middlesboro Independent School Systems. This is their middle school who last year actually decided to become a STEM certified school. What I want to do is show teachers and educators the value of listening and paying attention to what is in a student and help nurture what they see in them. It's hard to go against your nature, but if you can listen to yourself and follow that voice, then you have an obligation to nurture that. I'm John Schaffner, and I'm the pilot of Ax-2.
Representing the Saudi Space Commission and representing the Saudi Space Commission and serving as mission specialist, Ali Al-Karni is an Air Force captain in the Royal Saudi Air Force.
We will be commencing health check for launch escape system. Expect a momentary flight computer state change, followed by a transition back to pad hatch closed.
And Dragon copies, we saw that.
Having trained at King Faisal Air Academy, as well as multiple bases in the U.S., Ali has flown as a fighter pilot for 12 years. Ali was selected as an astronaut in 2020. Here's more on Ali.
I grew up in the southwest region of Saudi Arabia, in a very small town called Sabt al-Alaya. I've always wondered about planes and how they fly. Back then in Saudi Arabia, we did not have a lot of places or flying academies you could apply to. So I have to go and find a place that could train me. That's why I applied for the Air Force Academy to be a fighter pilot. The best moment for me is once I hit the throttles in full AB and the aircraft start rolling down the runway. And as I take off, I watch my shadow and see how fast I'm going. That gives me a joy that I cannot describe. I am Ali Al-Karni, and I am Mission Specialist 1 on Ax-2. Being selected to be part of this mission make me privileged and honored to represent my country. I was really surprised about the results out of the announcement. People are loving it. People are super supportive of the mission. I consider myself a newly married. I've been married for 3 years now. And I've had my daughter. She's 12 months old. And I want to share with them how big it is what I'm about to do. It is an amazing opportunity to be on top of a rocket filled with fuel and gas that are going to boost you to space. The team is amazing. We have worked so much to make sure we have a good crew coherence, and right now I can say that we do complement each other. Every single one of us has been trained to do everything regarding this mission.
I would like to thank Axiom Space for enabling us to go back to space and giving us this opportunity.
I have an amazing family. They are supportive of me throughout my career, and I want them to know before I step into the rocket that I love them, and I will always be there, whether physically or mentally, with them, and I'll do whatever it takes to make them feel happy and loved.
Representing the Saudi Space Commission and also serving as mission specialist, Rayana Barnawi has a master's degree in biomedical sciences from Al Faisal University in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and a bachelor's degree in biomedical sciences from Otago University in Dunedin, New Zealand. Here's a closer look at Rayana.
It's a historic moment for Saudi Arabia and the entire Arab world.
Saudi Arabia will be sending its first ever female astronaut into space.
I was always into exploring new things. Research was one of the things that fulfilled that feeling for me. Trying to experiment, finding a piece of the puzzle that could solve a mystery. I never thought that I will ever be going to space, but at the same time, it feels like a dream come true. It's an overwhelming feeling, of course. Home for me is a small town. My dad had a little farm. He taught us how to plant. That was one of the first experiments. That was one of the most fascinating feelings. My grandmother. To me, she is my role model. I can say that my grandma is my biggest fan, and I'm very glad that I have my grandma's support.
Saudi Arabia will be sending its first woman astronaut to the International Space Station. Rayana Barnawi, a biomedical researcher, is part of a private mission operated by Axiom Space.
Rayana, she is an amazing scientist. She's done stem cell research and breast cancer research, and we are really excited to have her on board the space station doing some of the same types of things in space.
It honestly feels like I am representing all Saudis' ambition, all female and all researchers as well. It's a big honor to be able to go to space and at the same time do the things that you love the most.
It's not just that you have a nation that's proud of you, but you are creating the dream and the opportunity for this next generation to become the next space engineers and creating the idea that the infinite is possible and that space is a true opportunity.
زي ما قال سمو ولي العهد محمد بن سلمان، نحن دولة للحالمين. أي حد عنده حلم يقدر يحلم عشان يوصل، وبدعم منه وبدعم من السعودية كاملة بإذن الله احنا حنوصل للهدف اللي احنا نبغاه. I am Saudi National Astronaut Rayana Barnawi.
We're now at T-minus 1 hour, 42 minutes, and 55 seconds until liftoff of Ax-2. We have confirmation that the side hatch was closed, and we got a good leak check. So everything is continuing to progress on time.
Great. And as operations continue, we want to provide an overview of some of the science and research activities planned for the Ax-2 mission. To help us unpack the breadth of Axiom-managed payloads is one who has helped every principal investigation team prepare for this mission, our very own chief scientist, Dr. Lucy Lowe. She's at Kennedy Space Center in Florida with Axiom Space Director of Digital Strategy, Sonia Gavankar-McKay. Sonia, great to see you, and we're excited to understand what's ahead in the next couple of weeks for our crew.
Thanks so much, Duke. It's great to be here with all of you as the excitement really builds toward launch. We're just a few miles away. In fact, you may be able to see the Falcon 9 rocket with the Ax-2 crew on board just over my shoulder. And yes, I'm joined with Axiom Space Chief Scientist for Microgravity Research, Dr. Lucy Lowe. Lucy, how excited are you for what's to come?
Hi, Sonia. I mean, it's a fantastically exciting mission. There is an absolute massive amount of research that the crew is going to be doing, and I can't wait to see them get started.
And there is a massive amount of research they have to do, and we have just a little bit of time to cover it, so let's dive right in. It is packed for it, but what has been the scientific strategy for this mission, and what do we expect to see?
So the scientific strategy is really continuing what we did on AX-1, which is expanding access to microgravity for a whole new global community of researchers. So we're really excited to welcome on board our Saudi Arabian partners and see them do the research they want to do. We also have some opportunities to expand commercial opportunities by manufacturing products in space that could be beneficial for life here on Earth. So we have a glut of projects that are going to be doing all kinds of stuff about in-space manufacturing. So we're really excited about those.
Now, you've organized the portfolio into 5 main categories, and we're going to kind of touch on each one of them very briefly. Let's start with physical sciences. I noticed that from the list there is radiation protection research as well as some storm-related research that is looking at how weather and climate and seeding clouds. Tell me what this all means.
Exactly. So we have a really fun experiment that's brought from us from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia looking at cloud seeding. So they're looking at how silver iodide crystals can actually form water vapor in a specially designed chamber. So they're not only understanding how cloud seeding could be more effective here on Earth, but they're also looking with a vision to perhaps extraterrestrial agriculture, so maybe growing crops on the moon and in Mars in future.
Wow.
We also have projects looking at radiation shielding, so the sun spits out a bunch of radiation. So looking at how different kinds of polymers could actually protect the electronics on the space station could actually help with future spacecraft design. And then finally, you mentioned storms. We have some really fun projects where the crew are actually going to be trying to capture images of what we call transient luminous effects, which are events which occur just above thunderstorms at the same time that lightning strikes. And we can't see them from the ground because we're underneath the clouds. So on top of the clouds, we can see these phenomena, and it helps us understand more about our own weather and climate down here on Earth.
Excellent. So the next portfolio is life sciences. Research includes DNA, nanomaterials, and reprogramming skin cells to help create regenerative medicine. There's also research planned to build on AX-1 science modeling tumor organoids to better predict and treat cancers. Can you break down a few of those for us and tell me again what we can expect to see, what the astronauts will be doing up in space?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I refer to some of those in-space manufacturing projects, so the DNA-inspired nanomaterial that you referred to could actually be used as a therapeutic delivery agent in future, or as a scaffolding for degenerating joints. We have also projects looking at 3D bioprinted tissues, so looking at liver and kidney and seeing how they respond in microgravity, which could be potentially very informative for helping us understand regenerative medicine efforts. And then we have a whole other project on stem cell manufacturing, which could actually then help with lots of kind of clinical applications here on Earth. So lots of research on that end, not even to mention all of the human research that our crew are very willing participants in, where they're doing all kinds of experiments to see how the human body responds to space, how it adapts to microgravity, and how we can use that knowledge not only to make space travel more safe for humans in future, but also help us understand our own physiology back here on Earth a little bit better.
Okay, on to tech. The research being conducted here seems to be how can we automate more to take up less time doing things like data transfer. We know about that on Earth. What's it like up in space? Making communications with Earth easier and literally tracking where supplies and materials are on board. I mean, they have a lot of space up there inside the building, right? So they have to be able to track where everything is, loose bolts and whatnot. What stands out to you in this research?
So it's interesting you mentioned how much space there is up there because there's fairly limited space.
Yeah,
so we have some,
more.
They can't exactly. So we have some Axiom technology demonstrations where we're demoing some of our own technologies that we can use on Axiom Station in future. But we also have some really fun technology demonstrations from our partners that are sampling the air inside the ISS. They're using special sensors called quartz crystal microbalances that can detect tiny molecules in the air and tell us a bit about the air quality inside the ISS. And then we have a really fun project from the MIT Media Lab where they're looking at what they call a gravity countermeasures loading suit or a skin suit, which actually models some of the effects of gravity on our crew, and so it helps them prevent some of the physical deconditioning that astronauts see when they go into space.
Really important research.
Absolutely.
What do you think the air is like up there?
I hear it smells of electronical equipment.
Oh, okay.
So
we'll wait for those little cubes to tell us a little bit more information and figure out how we can scrub it. Okay. Partnerships also very important with Axiom Space since it started, and it's really great to hear about all of this research that's really coming from so many institutions, educational organizations. Lucy, how are you seeing the commercial opportunities evolve, and what's the goal for us long term?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So we continue to expand our partnerships with a number of global research communities, which is really exciting, seeing really exciting research come in from new communities, new organizations, new researchers that have historically not had access to microgravity, and now we can provide that. But as I said, we're also very interested in opening up these new commercial economic opportunities to do things in space that can create materials or biomedical products that can benefit life here on Earth. Because that's ultimately what we want to do at Axiom, is everything we do in space, we want to be benefiting every human everywhere, which includes not just the astronauts, but all of us back down here as well.
Well, thank you so much, Lucy, for all your time. We're going to be talking to you during the mission as well to find out a little bit more about what's been transpiring up in space, what we expect to see down here, and so much more will come our way. Thank you so much, Lucy, for your time.
Thank you, Sonia.
Well, that is amazing groundbreaking work that we're going to be seeing, the additional insights of these studies, and so much. You can follow the efforts as they play out on orbit. Just visit us at axiomspace.com/AX2 research. We're going to send you back now to Hawthorne, to Duke and Kate. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Dr. Lowe. Well, switching gears a bit, Axiom Space is also working to create partnerships with companies that you wouldn't typically expect to hear about going to space. Some of those companies end up with some representation on board a mission as well.
Besides the crew, the Dragon is also carrying hundreds of kilograms of supplies and resources for the mission. Most of these materials are essential supplies, but every mission has a few fun surprises. One of those that's often discussed is the highly anticipated microgravity indicator. This is actually the only item inside Dragon that isn't secured at launch. Once the crew successfully reach orbit, the microgravity indicator will begin to float, allowing all of us to visually see what we've completed during the launch phase of the mission.
And to reveal the indicator, a fifth crew member named Gigi here is a very special greeting from Sharon, John, and